I want to talk about defending Israel. I'm here right now to defend Israel and to help you understand what's really going on. On October 7th, I've studied Bible prophecy for 48 years. I've been teaching on it for over 40 years. And what happened on October 7th was a seismic shift in Bible prophecy. There were legions of demons loosed in the earth on October 7th. Now, God is greater than Satan. We don't focus on Satan, but we understand he's a major player in the end times. Because in the end times, in the Bible, we see prophesied that this tiny little nation in the Middle East, about the size of the state of New Jersey, that the entire world is going to be focused on this tiny little nation, and ultimately they'll attack them. And this is coming true right before our very eyes. On October 6th, there was anti-Semitism. On October 7th, it absolutely exploded all over the world in a manner we haven't seen since the Holocaust. In fact, on October 7th, more people died at once on October 7th than it died since the Holocaust. And so this is a very, very serious time in history. And what I'm saying is the genie's not going back in the bottle. The toothpaste is not going back in the tube. We're not going back to a pre-October 7th time. Bible prophecy has shifted forward. It's going to continue to move forward. And I say, I don't know exactly the time that Jesus is returning. I believe the next major prophetic event that's going to happen is the rapture of the church. Jesus is coming for his church. I don't know the date, but I can tell you in my heart, more than any time in my life, I believe that the return of Jesus is imminent. And I believe that for many of us as believers, this may be our last chance, honestly, before we're raptured, to support Israel and to stand with Israel. And I'm not saying that, just to cause a stir. I'm saying that because I believe it to the bottom of my heart. I believe that we're living in the end of the end times, the last of the last days. And what we do right now concerning Israel is something that has an eternal significance. Certainly has a significance in a nation fighting for its very survival. Israel is fighting an existential threat from Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis in Yemen, the Islamic Jihad. All their enemies right now are gathered against them, and we need to stand with them. And so in January, I was invited by Pastor Larry Huck to go to the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. to see a 45-minute video of what actually happened. It was the footage of the terrorist attacks against Israel on October 7th. Now, much of the footage comes from Hamas telephones and social media. So when you hear people say, well, it really didn't happen, or it was Israel doing this, they show their faces. You see the Hamas terrorists doing what they're doing. In 45 minutes, we saw 139 Jewish people slaughtered. Now, the Palestinian terrorists, Hamas terrorists, were on drugs. They had taken drugs before the attack to heighten their sense of savagery and to lessen their sense of sympathy. And that's exactly what you saw. For 45 minutes, I saw men, women, and children attacked. Now, by the way, before the deputy ambassador to Israel introduced the video, he told us that they had omitted what they did to the babies. And many of you have heard what the terrorists did to the babies on October 7th, but it's horrific. But we saw older people, younger people, families, all murdered together. The terrorists, they're celebrating through the entire 45-minute video. Every time they spot a Jew, they start praising Allah, and they shoot them right there. They found 6 Israeli soldiers, girls, women, in a room hiding, and when they found them one at a time, and every time they found them, they praised Allah because they found another one, and they shot them right there on sight. One of the terrorists took a phone. He killed an Israeli woman, and he took her phone away from her and called home. And his mother answered. He's calling with the Jewish woman's phone, and his mother answered, and he says, "Mother, your son is a hero. I just killed 10 Jews with my bare hands." And she praised Allah, and he praised Allah. Then she handed the phone to his father. He said the same thing to his father, and his father said, "My son is a hero. My son is a hero. He's killed all these Jews." Well, they're trained from birth to kill Jews. That's what they're taught. From birth, they're taught to annihilate Israel and to kill Jews. But the world, in spite of all that, the world has turned against Israel. It's just the most amazing thing in the world, beginning with the United Nations. Now, United Nations Secretary General Guterres, now this is an article from Politico. This was on October 24th. And it says, Israel's ambassador to the United Nations is calling for the resignation of United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres after he said the Hamas attack on October 7th, in which 1,200 people were killed, did not happen in a vacuum. And here is the quote from Guterres. The Palestinian people have been subjected to 56 years of suffocating occupation, but the grievances of the Palestinian people cannot justify the appalling attacks by Hamas, and those appalling attacks cannot justify the collective punishment of the Palestinian people. And what he's saying here, and the reason they're calling for his resignation, is he's saying, yeah, they may have done what they did on October 7th, but it was justified. That's what he's saying. And other spokespeople for the United Nations have denounced Israel and praised Hamas. And so after October 7th, between October 7th and October 27th of 2023, there were 3,761 pro-Palestinian demonstrations and only 529 pro-Israel demonstrations in 3 weeks. And it doesn't account what's happened since then. Some of my friends landed in London a couple of days after October 7th. And they said when they landed at the airport, there was a pro-Palestinian demonstration going on. And all the way from their airport to the hotel, they saw nothing but pro-Palestinian demonstrations and not one pro-Israel demonstration. In my neighborhood here, I live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, about 15 minutes from here. And my granddaughters asked me one day if they could take me to lunch, and so I went to eat lunch with them. And we were driving home, and there was a big demonstration up there, a bunch of people on the street corners. And we drove up to see what it was. It was a pro-Palestinian demonstration in a neighborhood here in Dallas. And there were about 100 men, women, and children waving the Israeli flags, wearing keffiyehs, and shouting on a bullhorn that Israel is an apartheid state and they are committing genocide in Gaza and other things they were saying. Well, first of all, many other people were walking up when they were doing this. The thing that shocked me was the cars that were driving by. It was a very busy area, were honking in support. I was shocked in my neighborhood how many cars were honking in support of what they were doing. There are many lies that are being spread right now about Israel. One is October 7th never happened. And by the way, the reason that the Israeli embassy wanted to show, this was a group of leaders, business leaders and spiritual leaders, the reason they invited us to the embassy was they wanted us to see the footage so that we could tell people that it's real. And what I'm saying to you, it's real. And the Hamas terrorists perpetrated this against Israel. We saw it with our own eyes in a manner that could never be choreographed, could never be dramatized. This was real footage of real murders that were taking place by Hamas. Some people are saying it never happened. Some people are saying Israel did it. Some people are saying the Palestinian people, these people just simply want to coexist in peace, but the Jews won't have it. The Jews keep abusing them. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm going to show you history and what history proves about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and what really has happened since Israel began as a nation again in 1948. But here's a quote, and I think this is going to come up on the screen there. It says, "By the skillful and sustained use of propaganda, one can make a people see even heaven as hell or an extremely wretched life as paradise." And that's a quote by Adolf Hitler. By the skillful and sustained use of propaganda. That's exactly what you're seeing right now. By the way, TikTok, is owned by China, is one of the largest propagators of anti-Semitism in the world right now. Propagating lies about Israel and what happened on October 7th and what's happening between the Palestinians and the Israelis. But here's the truth, and I want to just take it apart. And I want to begin with Israel as being an apartheid state. So you might have heard this, that people, this is what was on the loudspeaker in this demonstration in my neighborhood. Israel is an apartheid state. Well, let me define apartheid so that when someone makes that comment, you can understand what they're saying. Apartheid is a policy or system of segregation or discriminations on the grounds of race. Segregation on grounds other than race. South Africa was famous for being apartheid because they had a 100% white government and blacks could not be in that government before Nelson Mandela. Well, that's apartheid. But here's the truth about Israel. 21.1% of the Israeli population is Arab Palestinian. And Israel has a democracy, a representative democracy. And so 21.1% of their citizens are Palestinian Arabs, and many of them serve in the Knesset. In the Knesset, this would be like our Congress. They have Arabs, Muslims, Palestinians, Christians, women, and even openly gay people. This is a representative democracy in Israel, and the Palestinians have a seat at the table. In fact, Palestinian citizens of Israel have more rights in Israel than they do in any other country in the Middle East. And so Israel is good to the people who are citizens, including their Arab citizens. So they're not apartheid. But Hamas is 100% apartheid because they're 100% Muslim. And they are against the Jews. You can't be a Jew and live in the Gaza. You can't be a Jew and serve in the government of Hamas. They're 100% Muslim. And so they're accusing Israel of being apartheid when in fact Hamas is apartheid. It's exactly the opposite, just like the devil. It's just everything is turned backwards. The other thing that they were saying on the loudspeaker is what Israel's doing in Gaza is genocide. Again, let me define terms here. Genocide is the deliberate or systematic killing or persecution of a large number of people from a particular nation or ethnic group with the aim of destroying that nation or group. Well, Israel has no bone to pick with the Palestinian people. They have no bone to pick with the Palestinian residents of Gaza. They're going after a terrorist group called Hamas. Let me say this, the Allied forces in World War II didn't have a bone to pick with the German people. They were going against the Nazi regime. And the Nazi regime were murderers and they were criminals, and they were going in there to eliminate them, and thank God they did, because the world is different today because they did. So what the Israeli soldiers are doing, by the way, there are 2.3 million residents in Gaza. And the death count right now in the Israel-Gaza war is about 29,000. That means 1.2% of Palestinian people have been killed by the Israeli soldiers since the beginning of the war. 1 out of 100, in other words. Well, that's not genocide. And again, it's not against the Palestinian people. It's against a terrorist group called Hamas. Israel, by the way, if Israel wanted to destroy the Palestinians in Gaza, they could do it one day. They've got the military power to wipe them out in one day. They have painstakingly tried to preserve civilian life in Gaza and to protect the Gazan residents. By the way, did you know that the Hamas terrorists, they use the people as shields? And they put this is what they're finding is they're having this Gaza operation. They find the military installations of Hamas in daycare centers, in schools, in hospitals. Right now, the Hamas is staging attacks against the Israeli military from humanitarian zones. You know, the world is saying we need to have humanitarian zones to help the Gazans, and we do. Hamas is using the citizens in humanitarian zones to stage attacks against Israel. And Pastor Larry Huck, I was with him, and he made this point. Hamas has built 500 miles of tunnels under Gaza to protect their soldiers, and they haven't built one above-ground shelter for their residents. It's all about Hamas. They could care less about their residents and their citizens, but Israel has done everything they can to preserve life. And by the way, since Hamas began, since their charter started, I'm going to read you their charter here in just a minute, they have vowed to annihilate Israel. That's genocide. Hamas has vowed to the genocide of Israel. Israel isn't committing genocide. Israel's very carefully going after a terrorist group. It is Hamas. Genocide is what they believe in. It's what they have from the very beginning. You hear this saying, this slogan, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. What that means is annihilate the Jews. That's what that means. And Americans, college students are saying that. People all over are saying that all over the world in these demonstrations. What that means, next time you hear that, that means kill every Jew, annihilate the Jews. And here's the charter of Hamas, by the way, when they say that Israel's committing genocide. Here's the charter, and this is a summary of the 36 articles of the Hamas charter, and this is by Georgetown University. Number one, the complete destruction of Israel as an essential condition for the liberation of Palestine and the establishment of a theocratic state based on Islamic law, Sharia. Number two, the need for both unrestrained and unceasing holy war, jihad, to attain the above objective. Number three, the deliberate disdain for and dismissal of any negotiated resolution or political settlement of Jewish and Muslim claims to the Holy Land. And four, the reinforcement of historical anti-Semitic tropes and calumnies married to sinister conspiracy theories. So this is a summary of the Hamas charter, and it is sinister, and they have, since the beginning, when they wrote their charter, they have stood for the annihilation of Israel. That's genocide. Israel has no intention of harming innocent Palestinians or anybody else for that matter. They're going against a terrorist group. So what I'm saying is it's lie after lie after lie. Now, Hamas and Hezbollah and the proxies of Iran, they're funded by Iran. Ali Khamenei, the Israel's supreme leader, stated that the cancerous tumor called Israel must be uprooted from the region, and that the perpetual subject of Iran is the elimination of Israel from the region. The perpetual subject of Iran. He also labeled Israel a country doomed to failure and annihilation, deeming it an illegitimate regime led by untouchable, rabid dogs who cannot be called human beings. And these are the people, these are the puppet masters behind Hamas, Hezbollah. Everything that you see is coming from Iran. They all stand for one thing: the elimination, the annihilation of the state of Israel. And that is the absolute truth. This is all documented. You can look all this up. Iran believes that Allah has called them to destroy Israel and to usher in the end times. Now, it's not the nation of Iran. It is the Islamic Republic of Iran. They are officially a Muslim nation, and they believe that they are on a mission from Allah to destroy the nation of Israel and to usher in the end times according to their theology. So this is an unholy war, to say the least. And Israel is not the aggressor. Iran is the aggressor. And here's another lie that I want to help you to understand the truth to. The Palestinians, this is what people say, the Palestinians are the victims and all they want is to peacefully coexist beside Israel, but Israel won't allow that, and the Israelis are the occupiers. Let's take a history lesson and come from Genesis 17 to current and understand what's actually happened in history. This is Genesis 17. God says, I will make you exceedingly fruitful. I will make nations of you, and kings shall come from you. And I will establish my covenant between me and you and your descendants after you and their generations, for an everlasting covenant to be God to you and your descendants after you. Also I give to you and your descendants after you the land in which you were a stranger, all the land of Canaan, as an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. So here are a few interesting facts about Israel. Israel is the only nation on earth directly created by God. When God called Abram to leave his home and go to a new place, to the promised land, God began Israel, and that's the problem. And I have a scripture I'm going to read you in just a minute. The entire problem is a spiritual problem because Israel is proof that God exists. The nation of Israel proves that there is a God, and Satan hates it, and he has been dedicated to the destruction of Israel since the very beginning. Secondly, Israel is the only place on earth specifically given by God to a specific group of people. God specifically gave the land of Israel to the Jews, and that's why it's the most contested piece of real estate on the earth that everybody wants. Number three, there has never been a time in the last 4,000 years that Jews have not lived in Israel. And Jay Sekulow wrote a book called Jerusalem. Jay is a brilliant lawyer. And in his book, he writes the book as a lawyer to prove the historical claim of the Jews to the land of Israel. And he proves in his book that for the last 4,000 years, there's never been a time that Jews have not lived there. Even when they've been defeated, even when others have been taken captive out of there, there's always been a remnant of Jews living in Israel because history proves that it's their land, and archaeology proves that historically it has belonged to the Jewish people. After being conquered by Rome, some people say, well, why was it called Palestine? Because Hadrian, the Roman Emperor Hadrian, after they defeated the Jews, after AD 70 and AD 135, that he renamed Judea Palestine to strip the nationhood from Israel and to punish them for what they had done, for their rebellion against Rome. As a result of being conquered, many Jews were led around the world, became scattered around the world, but there was always a remnant there in Israel. But in the 19th and 20th centuries, actually beginning in the 18th century, Jews began to migrate back to the Promised Land. And in 1917, a very important development, the Balfour Declaration, came forth. The Balfour Declaration was a public statement issued by the British government in 1917 announcing its support for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people. Extremely important. Just the statement itself by a prominent nation like Britain at that time that Israel should have their own nation, the Jews should have their own nation. In the 1940s, 6 million Jews, this is a history lesson. In the 1940s, 6 million Jews were slaughtered by Hitler. They were murdered by Adolf Hitler and the Nazi regime. Now, this is the devil's end game, is he wants to take them out. He wants to kill, the final solution, to kill all the Jews. And Adolf Hitler is an idol in much of the Arab world, much of the Muslim world. Mein Kampf is being read by people all over the world. It's had a resurgence, being a bestseller in the times we're living in, because many people look at Adolf Hitler as being enlightened, even though he was Satan-possessed, demon-possessed. In November of 1947, the UN presented a resolution to partition Palestine. It was called UN Resolution 181, and it recommended a two-state solution. Now, they're talking about a two-state solution right now. And the United States, the United Nations, the European Union, nations all over the world are trying to pressure Israel into entering into a two-state solution. Let me tell you why that's a disaster. First of all, the United Nations presented a plan, Resolution 181, in 1947, recommending a partitioning of Palestine, which we call Israel today. Here's a map of it right here. This was the actual map presented in 1947. And they were presenting a two-state solution. I want you to notice on the map, the orange there, this was the Arab land. They didn't call them Palestinians, they were Arabs. That was the Arab land. The blue is Jewish. And right in the middle of the map there, this little white area, that's Jerusalem. It wasn't given to the Arabs or the Jews. It was an international no man's land or international neutral zone. So look at all the land there. And what I want you to notice is on the blue, the bottom part is desert. The Arabs got dramatically more agricultural land than the Jews. And so this was by far not a perfect map for the Jews. But here's what happened in 1947. The Jews said, good. The Israelis said, fine, we'll take that deal. You're offering us a two-state solution. This was approved by the United Nations. This was a partition plan for Palestine, and they gave the Arabs more agricultural land, better land. And the Jews said, we'll take that deal, even though they didn't get Jerusalem. They didn't get as much agricultural land. They said, we'll take that deal. The Arabs violently rejected it, and immediately in November of 1947 began to attack Jews and kill Jews, and protest and riot and terrorist attacks and everything. After the United Nations presented a two-state solution that was in the favor of the Arabs, Israel accepted it, they rejected it. But on May 14th of 1948, when the British mandate over Palestine ended, Israel declared their independence. The next day, May 15th of 1948, they were attacked by Egypt, Transjordan, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. 5 Arab states. In other words, the two-state solution, the first two-state solution in 1947, the Arabs rejected it, the Israelis accepted it, they declared their independence. The next day, 5 Arab nations violently attacked the newly declared nation of Israel. Israel didn't attack them. Israel said, yes, we'll take that deal. We'll accept the boundaries of the land that you gave us. The Arabs rejected it, and those 5 nations attacked Israel with a stated purpose. They said, here's the purpose of this attack. Their intentions were declared by Azam Pasha, Secretary General of the Arab League, and here's what he said: it will be a war of annihilation. It will be a momentous massacre in history that will be talked about like the massacres of the Mongols or the Crusades. This is the Secretary General of the Arab League, and he's talking about the attack against Israel in 1948. This is a war of annihilation. It's never been about the land. It's not about the land. It's not about how much land. It's about the existence of Israel. The hatred for the people of Israel since the very beginning, it was about annihilation. Remember the charter of Hamas that calls for the annihilation of the Jews without any negotiation whatsoever? By the way, this is another map. This is the map after the Armistice Agreement of 1949. The war broke out. Israel won the war against 5 Arab nations. The fledgling Israeli army and the people defeated 5 Arab nations. This is the Armistice Agreement of 1949. Notice now that it says the green there, this is Jordan control, this is the Arab. The blue on the left side, the bottom, that's Gaza, that was under Egypt control. But the salmon area, look how big that is. That's how much land the Israelis took from the other Arab nations. And the international community recognized Israel's new borders because they had been attacked. Now, the Arabs didn't. The Arabs said, no, that's just a temporary map. because this is just an armistice agreement. We don't recognize this long term. The international community said you were attacked and you have the right to the land that you gained. And of course, the reason for the attack was because they were using that land, of course, to invade Israel. The first partition plan, the first two-state solution, was rejected by the Arabs. The second was rejected by the Arabs. And for the next 18 years, they continued terrorist attacks, murders, all kinds of provocations against Israel. And finally, in June of 1967, there was the Six-Day War where Israel fought Egypt, Jordan, and Syria and won the war decisively. Here's another map. Look at this map that's coming up here. This is the map after the 1967 Six-Day War. Look at the striped blue area. All the blue areas, what Israel took. All the striped areas, what they took in the 67 Six-Day War, which was the Golan Heights. And by the way, back in 1948, they took West Jerusalem. Now they have East Jerusalem. After 1967, they have the West Bank, they have the Sinai, and they have Gaza. It was a decisive war for Israel. Every single time the Arabs attacked Israel, Israel won and took land away from them. And so all of the maps, everything that I'm showing you here, Israel said yes to a two-state solution. The first time, the second time, then 1967 Six-Day War, they took all the land back because the Arabs were using it, the Palestinians were using it to invade them. And by the way, I just want to take you back to October 7th. In 2005, of course, in 1967, Israel took the Sinai, they gave that back to Egypt after pressure, from the international community. And then they've kept the West Bank, they've kept East Jerusalem, they've kept the Golan Heights. But we gave back Gaza, they gave back Gaza in 2005 under pressure from the United States and the United Nations. Okay. And here's what we said to Israel. Listen to what I'm saying. Please listen to what I'm about to say. What we said to Israel in 2005 was, if you give this land to the Palestinians, you'll have peace. This was Land for Peace under George W. Bush administration. If you'll just give them Gaza, they'll give you peace. And 2 years later, in 2007, Hamas won the election. They haven't had an election since. They've dominated, through an authoritarian regime, they have dominated the Palestinian people and used it as a base of attacking Israel. Since 2007, Israel's been attacked over and over and over by Gaza. And you might ask the question, by Hamas from the Gaza, you might ask the question, that just says, then why would Israel ever let their guard down on October 7th? Why would Israel ever, not be prepared for that attack, knowing who Hamas was? Because for the last year, before October 7th, Hamas was telling Israel they wanted peace. It was all a lie. This is how much Israel wants peace. They were willing to make peace. The Abraham Accords, what they were about to do with Saudi Arabia, was one of the major reasons for the Hamas attack. But Hamas was saying to Israel, hey, let's be friends. Hey, we're neighbors, let's be friends. See, and they talk about the suffocating, occupation of Israel. Well, I drove through the West Bank about 16 months ago, and you see Arabs and Palestinians and Jews living next door to each other, living and doing business together, and it's all free, okay? But talking about Hamas in Gaza, Israel built a fence around it and a wall around it to protect themselves. If you had a neighbor, and by the way, the Egyptians won't let them in either. The Egyptians have their own wall on the southern end of Gaza to keep the Palestinians from going into the Sinai, because the Egyptians kicked out the Muslim Brotherhood, which that's where Hamas came from. They kicked them out a long time ago, and they don't want them back because they're like a cancer. And so if you had a neighbor that said to you, I'm going to go in my house over here and build a bomb and weapons, I don't recognize your right to live, nor your family's right to live, and as soon as I get enough weapons, I'm going to come over here and kill you. How would you relate to that neighbor? Would you build a fence? Would you keep an eye out? Would you buy guns? Would you protect yourself? Well, if you're smart, you would. And that's exactly what happened with Hamas in Gaza. From the very beginning of their existence, they have vowed themselves to the destruction of Israel. And Israel kept two eyes on them all the time. Israel had to constantly protect themselves against attacks from Hamas in Gaza. And finally, Hamas began to talk kindly to Israel, saying to them, we just want peace, we just want to be friends. And Israel let down their guard. And now here's a slogan that's going around in Israel: never again. Never again. It happened in the Yom Kippur War on October 6th of 1973, when they were attacked by Egypt and Jordan. on the holiest day of their year when they had their guard down. And now they did it again. Hamas came, lulled them to sleep. They believed what they were saying, which was a big mistake. And now what Israel is saying is, never again, never again. And now the world community is trying to pressure Israel into a two-state solution, making a deal with the devil, and making a deal with people who are vowed to their destruction. And Israel's saying no. They're just in an impossible situation. Exactly the way Bible prophecy said it would happen. What you're seeing right now is exactly what Bible prophecy said would happen. And for the Jews, it's not over. They have a lot more history coming up, more wars coming up. And ultimately, in the book, What's Next, the Israeli-Gaza War, we talk about prophetically what we believe is about to happen. And one of the things I believe is about to happen is the rapture of the church, which you should be very excited about if you're a believer. What I also believe is about to happen is the arrival of the Antichrist. There's going to be an Antichrist that's going to come and make a deal with Israel for 7 years, a covenant. He's going to confirm a strong covenant with them for 7 years. But it's the deal with the devil, and they're going to make it. In the middle of it, he's going to break the peace treaty. But understand this, through my entire adult life as a student of Bible prophecy, this is exactly the world where I envisioned an Antichrist figure would step on the world stage. I don't know when it's going to happen. I don't know who it is. All I'm saying is everything is set up right now for some answer man to step onto the world stage and to offer a deal. That he would be a brilliant negotiator, brilliant foreign policy expert. But in fact, he's the Antichrist. And in the middle of the agreement, he's going to break that agreement. I believe that's the world we're living in right now. Other prophecies that are about to come true. Let me go back to the real problem. And this is a scripture in Revelation 12. Now, this is symbolism and is showing us a big picture of what the devil's been up to for thousands of years related to Israel. This is Revelation 12. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great fiery red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 diadems on his heads. His tail drew a third of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was ready to give birth, to devour her child as soon as it was born. She bore a male child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up to God and to his throne. Then the woman fled into the wilderness where she has prepared a place by God that they should feed her there for 1,260 days. And war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought with the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought, but they did not prevail. Nor was a place found for them in heaven any longer. So the great dragon was cast out, that serpent of old, called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was cast to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. This is an overview. This is a picture of what's really going on in the heavenlies. And what's really going on in the heavenlies is a battle between Satan and the nation of Israel. And it says here that the dragon, Satan, was waiting for the Messiah to be born. There was a woman who was pregnant. This woman represents Israel, also represents Mary. But the dragon was ready to devour the male child as soon as he was born. Since the beginning of the nation of Israel, Satan has known that the Messiah is going to come from the nation of Israel. And he was ready, this is the dragon was ready to devour the male child. It's all about God. It's all about Jesus Christ. The battle over Israel right now is all a spiritual battle between God and Jesus, between Satan and Jesus. And so understand this, it says here that when the child was born, that the dragon was there to devour the child. But wait just a minute. When Jesus was born in Bethlehem, there wasn't a dragon there. That's not the way it happened. But there was a man named Herod. There was a king named Herod, and Herod, as soon as he heard from the wise men that there was a king being born in Bethlehem, he decided to kill all the infant males in Bethlehem. See, Satan uses people. That's my point. It wasn't Satan directly there to kill Jesus. It was, Satan doesn't have direct authority over us. If he did, he'd kill all of us right now. Satan has to have a human partner. And so Satan is looking for someone evil enough to kill, of course, little children. That's what Hamas did on October 7th. See, right now the devil is using Hamas. And I believe that God loves all people. This is not a show saying Israel's great, everybody else is bad. God loves the Palestinians, he loves the Iranians, he loves the Egyptians. God loves people. But God is against people who stand against Israel.